Greetings! My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything Dungeons & Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos every Thursday, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we are very pleased to be showing off some awesome software from our very good friends at DungeonFog.
Designing maps for Dungeons & Dragons can be relatively time-consuming, and if you don't have a lot of artistic talent, they may not look the best. And it can be really challenging to find great resources online to build and design your own maps for dungeons.
There are a lot of different map-making tools, and particularly if you're looking for something that you can use with a virtual tabletop or something that you can print out and share with your players at the table, it can be really difficult to find something that is easy to use that also produces brilliant results. Now, full disclosure, DungeonFog has sponsored this video and other videos on our channel, and they have provided us with a copy of their full licensed software so that we can use for the purpose of this review. However, we will be sharing with you our full opinions of the software today as we walk through how to use it, and so that you can assess for yourself if this is the right tool for you. We've really fallen in love with this software and think it's really something special, so let's dive in and see how we can use it. Kelly and I have already spent a bit of time making a couple different maps with the software, and we've exported these as PNG images, and we'll have links in the description below so that you can download some of the maps that we've created with the software already and maybe use them for your own games. So we've just loaded up DungeonFog, and we've got a couple of our recent maps that we've worked on right here. These are ones that Kelly and I have kind of poked around with already, but let's start making a new map together right now.
So when you're sitting down to design your new map, you can select some of the parameters and options, name your map. There's a lot of different features that you can use here to really help customize the map right off the get-go. What size is it going to be? And then we can jump in and start making something cool.
By default, I get this really clear green field sort of canvas on this unnamed level of my dungeon. And I'm going to go ahead and just call it right away. I'm going to call it level 1.
So you can select the floor and change up. It doesn't need to be a grassy field. You can really set this anywhere. You can make it underground. You can make it in a dungeon. You can make it in a wasteland or in snow-covered tundra. There's really options for any sort of atmosphere where your dungeon is going to be located.
Yeah, now one thing that I did find when selecting the textures for DungeonFog is it's really helpful to note that you can actually rotate and scale all the textures up, and particularly for the background levels like this, I find that scaling them up quite a bit and then rotating them makes them look a little bit more natural. Once we've made the base level of our dungeon, we actually can now draw rooms. And this is kind of the weird element of DungeonFog that it took us a little while to wrap our heads around it, but once you see how easy this is, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, you can simply grab the room tool and then just draw the outer walls of your room, and it's going to automatically fill in that room with a beautiful wall design around the outside, and you'll have these floor patterns that you can then use to create whatever it is that you want inside of your dungeon.
Yeah, so I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to use as my texture here, I'm going to find this one for stone. And I'm going to go for the work stone, this stone tiling, which is a very nice default dungeon sort of style here for what I'm working with. And what's cool is once I've actually built these rooms, once I've actually made a couple, I don't have to make square rooms at all. I can make octagonal rooms with weird diagonals and put them on any sort of line. And in fact, if you hold shift when you make a room, it pulls you off the grid entirely, so you can make a completely irregular shaped room if you want to.
Which is perfect for caverns or underground passages where the walls aren't going to be structured and aligned. You can just hold down the shift key and kind of be free and flowing with your room designs for caves and caverns.
And then once you've actually built a room with DungeonFog, you can then use the selection tool and click on it to move it around and alter it after the fact. And what I really love about this too is that if you need to make changes to it, you can click on the walls themselves and split them in half so that you can add more points if you really need to do some major reconstructive surgery to your walls. You can also just delete them in this mode and completely reconstruct your dungeon as you built it.
When you click on a wall, you can also make it curved or cavernous to change the atmosphere, the texture of that room. So you can actually play around a lot with different forms of design in your rooms. You don't have to just stick to a box.
Yeah, I really like how flexible this is, and you can even do concave circle shapes. So the tools in DungeonFog right out of the box provide you with almost anything that you need to make any sort of shape you can imagine.
So we've made all of these rooms, but there's no passages between them. So that's where the doors tool is going to come in super handy.
Yeah, it's really just as simple as grabbing one of the doors. I got this big archway here and clicking where I want to put it. And it really actually doesn't matter. I can put it on the outer walls as well. This is because you can use the texture tool with DungeonFog to make both above ground and below ground buildings or carved out dungeon rooms. So you can put in both windows and doors depending on if you're making an above ground environment or an underground environment.
Another great thing that I will point out at this moment, if you're looking at the doors section or even some of the other sections available in this software, you're going to notice that it's not limited to Dungeons and Dragons fantasy creation. You're going to see sections for cyberpunk, modern, sci-fi. There's a lot of different types of maps that you can build. So regardless of the tabletop game that you are playing, there are options in here to create maps and doors and rooms for that setting.
One of the other things that we can do as well is if we don't want to connect our rooms with doors like this, one of the other cool features that you can do in DungeonFog, just as before, is when you click on one of your walls that you've created, you actually have the option of hiding the wall that you made. So this does let you make larger rooms that are connected with much larger openings than what the door tool itself can create. So if you do need to make like a wide opening of some kind between two rooms, maybe a big archway for giants or dragons to move through, but you want to have a clear delineation between a passageway and a door, you can use this feature to actually make those openings wider than normal.
So we have our rooms, we have our doors, but we don't have anything in our dungeon yet. Luckily, there is an extensive list of props available to place around your dungeon to really bring it to life.
This is so much dungeon dressing, and of course, because we were given from DungeonFog the whole premium level subscription to the application, there's over 3,000 assets, and DungeonFog is adding new assets all the time.
But the tools are very easy to use. You can grab one of the props, place it in the dungeon you want. If you didn't place it properly, you can always grab the selection tool and select it. You can change the rotation, the scaling.
Yeah, quite interestingly, you can make the props change color if you need to. So there's a whole option here where you can colorize whatever you've created, and you have the options to change the hue, the saturation, the brightness of the object, and really transform them into something completely different. It's amazing how just changing the colors of something modifies it in such a dramatic way.
My absolute favorite part about placing these props is if you do decide to place something like a fireplace or a lantern, a candlestick, or a torch, you can actually add in dynamic lighting effects. And not only can you add in these dynamic lighting effects, you can adjust how far the range on the light is. And you can select other objects in the room that might be affected by the light source and add shadows to them. And if they cast a shadow, the shadow will appear appropriate to the light source. I find that this simple tool is what really brings the atmosphere to life in these dungeons. Honestly, I've never had more fun than adding a torch in and seeing the shadows fall through the room on all the objects I placed. It makes it much more ominous and creepy, and I love it.
I completely agree with you, Kelly. I think that putting in the objects into the rooms, like the torches and the fires and the light sources, really makes DungeonFog's maps come to life. They feel really like vibrant environments. And so when you're playing around with the overall lighting of the whole thing, one of the cool things to note here is how you can change the ambient light and reduce the light of the rooms individually and the stage as a whole. And that makes the individual lighting effects that you put in very dramatic in how they affect the whole environment. And it really makes you feel like you're creating that dark, murky dungeon environment. I got this summoning circle here that I can put in, and by default, it doesn't have any light attached to it. But I can click on it, and I can say turn it into a light source and actually make it cause this like red glow that fills the entire chamber. And that makes it truly eerie and scary and a really beautiful prop within the overall environment. Beyond playing with these lighting effects, we can manipulate things in a lot of different ways. One of the first things that I just want to point out is that if we're creating this kind of scary looking cultist summoning environment, maybe these plain dungeon floors aren't working for us. So this paint roller tool lets you really quickly change over the textures that you're using in your various dungeon rooms.
Yeah, it's so fast and so simple to just be able to rearrange and change up your entire dungeon. If you have something pop into your head that maybe, oh, I want to change this or I need to move these pieces, it's all pretty intuitive and pretty quick.
Now, also what I can do is I can use this paintbrush to paint on textures into my dungeon rooms. So if I want to make this marble floor more look cracked and dirty, I can actually paint the dust and the debris right onto it and make it much more of a dirty kind of mud track looking dungeon instead.
Adding in this little bit of dust or dirt or something that's glowing in the room is just going to complete that atmosphere and make it really beautiful for your players to experience.
I've kind of built this little map out now a little bit more in detail. Added some more light sources, added some more props and other environments to it. And if I'm running this map as a dungeon master, DungeonFog builds the note-taking right into the software itself.
So up at the top left of the screen, there's a section called GM Notes, which allows you to actually add in information about the dungeon that you've created. If you click on GM Notes, the first thing you're going to see is a blank screen with what looks like a standard word processor open on it. So you can drop each room in and you can add a name to what that room is. You can put in a summary, what objects are in it. All of the information and all the assets that you've added into that room are already going to be listed there. But then on top of that, you can add in what monsters might appear, NPCs, traps, hidden objects. You get a full summary of everything that is going to happen in that room.
So your rooms get numbered and named, and if you're doing this as you create them, when you go into your Dungeon Master notes, you're going to be able to use these while you are compiling the whole system all together.
This just adds that extra element for dungeon masters who are creating these dungeons to be able to add in details and information to every single room in the dungeon and have an easy to manage way to look through it, work through it, and bring it to life at the table.
When you add props into the environment, you can actually define if they need keys or if they're trapped or concealed in some way. And when you turn those flags on, those get reflected in the Dungeon Master notes themselves.
So now that you've created your dungeon and you have all of your GM notes ready, you can export them as a PDF or high-res images to use at your table.
Exporting it is super easy. You get a high-resolution PNG graphic that you can now import into a virtual tabletop application or share with your players, or you can even turn this tiling mode on, and what it will do is it will break your dungeon into printable tiles to make it easier to print it out at home with a home printer.
Not only that, but there's also an excellent feature if you are going to be showing this map on a TV or projector for your home games. You can actually implement a fog of war feature so that any rooms that the players haven't discovered yet are hidden to them.
If you're using it at a table, this Fog of War feature works really great. It doesn't actually link in with existing virtual tabletop applications. So if you are using a VTT for your games like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or otherwise, you'll actually just export the PNG image from DungeonFog and then bring that into your virtual tabletop application of choice and then set that up from there.
At the end of the day, DungeonFog is the best dungeon map making software that I have personally used, and I've actually fallen in love with designing maps for no real reason other than just to play around with the software and see what my mind can create. It's such a fun program to use, and you can let your imagination run wild. DungeonFog is actually free to use, and you can try it out today at DungeonFog.com. But if you do want to sign up for a premium subscription, you'll get access to over 3,000 high-resolution props, textures, assets, and more details for your maps, with assets added every month by the team working on it.
The free version of DungeonFog only lets you have about 3 maps at the same time, so the premium subscription does get you the full program completely unlocked, lets you have the beautiful high-resolution graphics, but just being able to poke around and try it out and see what it can do on its own with the base level will give you a really good idea if this is the right tool for you to use, and then if you really want to take it up to the next level, get all those assets in there, grab that premium subscription. I think it's entirely worth it. If you're homebrewing your own campaigns or making your own maps, there's so many options out here, and what's even more is that you can share the maps with other people through DungeonFog. So I've even been looking through the archives of what other people have made with DungeonFog, and then you can just clone them right over to your own account and start modifying them as well. So the possibilities of this are really endless, and there's a great community here too to be involved with to share more maps and resources for our games.
So follow the links in the description below or go to DungeonFog.com to try out this program for free and get a new map set up for your next game.
And with that, we will see you next time in the dungeon.